streaming going on. In order to see the streaming, you have to go to the Grace St. Paul's website and click on third Sunday of the 23rd. What is that again? Third Sunday of Easter, and that is the stream of this event. So if you need to do that, please do that. We're going to be delayed just a little bit. Technical difficulties. Thank you for coming to celebrate Paula's amazing life. I am Michael, Paula's brother. Probably most of you know that already. A few words about that first musical selection, Love's Paradox. The paradox is that while love is the source of our greatest happiness and joy, when our loved ones are taken away from us, is the source of our greatest sorrow. I thought for a long time, I thought long and hard about what I could say to express my feelings and came up short. So most of what I will say will be said through my music. I don't have Paula's effortless eloquence. Losing Paula has cut a giant hole in our universe. It's unimaginable how much joy and happiness could leave us so suddenly. But while the hole is cut in our universe, I'd like you to think the hole is not in our hearts, because Paula helped fill our hearts with joy, happiness. She taught us so much. She taught us how to laugh. And I just hope people sharing their memories will help you realize that the hole in your heart is not really there. So I'm going to invite our first speaker, and I've already forgotten. That is, I also call it Johnny. This is Johnny Shea, because I can't pronounce his name in Mandarin.
Good evening. I'm Johnny Shea. Paula and I are second cousins. My mother and Paula's mother share the same maternal grandparents. When June, that's her mother, was in college in Chongqing or Chongqing, China, that was the capital during the war against Japanese, June and her future husband, Paula's father, came and visited our family at that time. And June also stayed with us in Shanghai for a short time before she left for America. Paula was 7 years old when I first met her at their home on University Boulevard Avenue, University Boulevard was here, but Chicago University Avenue in Hyde Park, Chicago in 1959, when I just arrived in America to enroll in Wabash College in Indiana. Her home was my home, away from home, in Chicago, until 1967, when the Fans moved to Tucson. The persons who know Paula the best and longest are the Garros family. Madame Garros and her daughter, Joanne Garros, sitting back there. They met, the Fan family and the Garros family met and lived in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, when Tom Garros and Charlie Fan were colleagues at the University of Chicago's Yerkes Observatory. But they parted in 1957 when Charlie Fan joined the University of Arkansas in the physics department there. And when in 1961, Tom Garros came to Tucson to join the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory at the university. The two families had a pact when they were together because they were both foreigners, the girls from Holland and the Fans from China. They made a pact to adopt each other's family had something happen to any one of them. And that friendship lasted, and finally the Fans came here and joined with the girls in 1967. Now, when Charlie Fan joined the physics department at that time, so they were together again. Paula's father left Arkansas and was invited to join John Simpson's fledgling space research group at the University of Chicago in 1958. Together with Simpson, they developed a lot of high-resolution space instruments in cosmic ray research. In 1962, Charlie introduced me to Simpson, and I was hired for a summer job to test parts that would go on to the space instruments. That summer experience opened the door for me to study physics in graduate school at the University of Chicago in the fall of 1963. The first time my name appeared on the publication was with Charlie and Simpson in the Physical Review letter in 1966. I learned a lot of experimental techniques from Paula's father and graduated in 1969, 2 years after they left for Tucson. But in 1971, I joined the physics department here with the recommendation of Paula's father. So I'm again, this time with my wife, Shigeko, my son, Nianhe, joined with the Fan family again in Tucson. In Chicago and in Tucson, Paula's parents were like parents to me in many ways. And my children, they were the grandparents. And we are indebted to the Fan family a whole lot. You all know and admire Paula's musical talents. And I had the privilege and delight of hearing her play Johann Sebastian Bach, Jesu meine Freude, when she was 9 years old, on a great old piano in their home in Greenwood Avenue in Hyde Park. My daughter, Shizuka, had the privilege and honor and joy to have Michael playing the violin and Paula the piano at her wedding at St. Michael's and All Angels Church down that way. In addition to her musical mastery and her dedication to music education, Paula was a loving and caring person, as many of you already know. She was always taking care of somebody else while keeping a full schedule of work. I don't know how she managed it, but she did it. Allow me just to cite a few examples of her compassion. Paula was very close to the children of John Diamond, her late husband. After John's death, she had made many, many visits to her children, her stepchildren and relatives in the UK. And she was a source of comfort and support for these relatives far away. Paula loved not only people like you and me, but she also loved animals, especially cats. Raising and nurturing 23 cats was beyond my imagination, but she did it. The lucky cats were well cared for even when she was on travel to faraway places to take care of other animals in the wild, especially the endangered species. So her involvement with Earthwatch was with her sister Anna. That was their passion. And I'm sure many of the animals benefit from their visits without even knowing. Paula and Anna's enthusiasm for Earthwatch projects inspired two of my granddaughters. My daughter's oldest and my son's oldest, and they are going to start their own venture this summer to do Earthwatch. That's because of Paula and Anna. Paula had inspired many of us and taught us, many of us, many ways by her caring actions and convincing words. Her sudden death reminded me that none of us were born with our own consent, and nor would we die the way we choose to. Between these two involuntary instances, our heartbeat, our breath are also not under our control and decision. And yet, the time between our first and last breath, we have to face the challenge of life of making decisions, making choices. It is clear to me that Paula had chosen to give others, whether her family, friends, students, colleagues, cats, or other animals, her best loving care with all her given talents and learned skills. Indeed, Paula lived an abundant life of love. Let us therefore celebrate Paula's life by loving each other and with a joy. On this occasion, I resonate with a simple 8th century Christian hymn, which is rooted in the first letter of John, which says, God is love. But the hymn goes like this: Ubi caritas e amor, ubi caritas Deo ibi est. Thank you for being here. Amen.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Tianshu Wang. I'm one of Paula's students. I flew in from Ohio this morning. I love Tucson. This is the place where I began my American dream. It's sunny, it's cheerful, it's bright. It never occurred to me that this song, when I visit Tucson, that there's no Paula in person. I came to Tucson in 1993, exactly 30 years ago. Back then, it was a different world. I never left China before I arrived in Tucson. And I had no idea what my future studies will be like in a strange place. I knew nobody here. But I had Paula. She took my hands and guided me every step of the way. I didn't know anything I knew very little about American culture. It was before the internet era. So I didn't know about the significance or the holiday called Thanksgiving. But I never missed celebrating the Thanksgiving holidays with her family. She took me to her parents' home on my first Thanksgiving. So I learned about the tradition, the wonderful tradition about family gathering. And there I met her parents, whom I can talk Chinese with. And I also met Mr. Shea. And I met Michael, who didn't speak Chinese. And also two very cute boys, Stephen and David. And I loved their hairstyle. So years later, when I had two boys of my own, they wore bowl cuts all the way through their childhood because I saw Michael's kids there. And I thought it was the cutest when Stephen called Paula's husband Uncle John. So from that point on, that was my Uncle John. I began to call Mr. John Denman my Uncle John. And John would say to me, "So really, your feet are that big? You wear 10 shoe? Size 10 shoe?" That's how he remembered my name, by thinking about the shoe. So there I felt a connection, a beautiful, loving environment. I felt I had a family, I had a home in a strange place. So yeah, Paula provided me a home. And as a family member, I had my duties too. And one of the very important duties were taking care of her cats when she's away, traveling overseas in the summer. So, and Paula's cats have had the most artistic and creative names. I remember at the time when I was around her cats, there were Camino, there were Ludmilla, there were Piccolo, and there was one, it sounds like Pavarotti, but it's not Pavarotti, something Rotti. It's just very musical, artistic. And one of the cats, a little thin orange cat, was diabetic. And Paula said, "Well, you need to learn how to give her insulin shot before you feed her." So I learned, and I did a very good job. So the cat cooperated too. So before each dinner, she would just let me mess her neck and give her the shot. So I did all that. But as I said, it was a very different environment for me. A lot of things were new. So Paula, that was the first summer when she was away, and she gave me her key to her house on Leicester Street. So she said, "Well, you stay here, you take care of the cats, and you can practice here too." So I was in heaven those 3 months, the first summer. So I was in charge of the cat kingdom there. But so many things were new. And I remember the first morning when I woke up in her big green water bed. I was sick. I was seasick. It was so dizzy. It was new. It wasn't very comfortable to me. And then I walked into the kitchen. I saw this elegant looking food maker believe it or not, back then I didn't know what a toaster was. So I thought this can cook food. It's a device that has electric. So, and the two openings were just like the size of a kebab. So I put meat in there. And I broke her good-looking toaster, and I was scared to death. And so when the summer finished, Uncle John and Paula came back. Uncle John was praising me by having happy cats, and the floor was so clean, and everything was great. But I had to confess, I broke your thing in the kitchen. And Paula laughed so hard. She said, what did you do with it? Well, yeah, so that was a little episode. Then, a few years later, at my doctoral oral exam, and Paula joked to the committee, said, we should ask Tianshu how to use a toaster. Paula told a lot of jokes in our coaching session. And due to the fact I didn't grow up here, sometimes I didn't get her jokes. And she would go, what? You don't know what Popular Pew was? Really? You've never heard of that character? It was a skunk. And then she would go long and long, to tell me about the stories. So I learned a lot of the cultural stuff where, I couldn't get anywhere else because I was in China when that was around. And she, as you can tell, she was so much more than just a piano professor to me, a piano teacher. She was my teacher in every way, and she made sure I do good writing in English. So she would coach me how to write, how to express my ideas into authentic, good English. Make sure you don't use run-on sentences, and she would polish every piece. I would come to her with every piece of my writing. So after so many years, I still have that, learning habit when she taught me. And I knew if I had a problem or anything, every time when I'm not so confident, I have a great source. So, and she probably didn't know that the way she touched my life went beyond just making me a very naive young lady to a piano professor. But last year, when my younger son, Kevin, applied for college, and because he's doing a non-music path, so I wasn't confident in guiding him along the way. And Chinese parents, we want our children to be good, to be tough, to do the best they can. So the writing essays were important in his materials because they don't have auditions like we do. And guess who I turned to? I asked for help to Paula. I said, well, can you polish or can you proofread Kevin's essays? And of course she did. She, after she revised it, the same thing can sound so smart, so beautiful. And it plays such an important part in his applications. And he was admitted by so many good schools, and he chose to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Because through me, my son, who was a Chinese American, who was raised here, he knew the kind of life I've been through. And in his mind, he was thankful, he was grateful for a person with our background can dream big. So in a way, every step of the way, Paula was there to influence me and my family. And last year, while she was celebrating virtually with me about this, we were so proud of him. And she also shared this touching story of a immigrant cadet from Haiti. How do you say it? Haiti. Yeah. Who graduated one of the top cadets of class of 2022. And I told Paula, you should come to Kevin's graduation when it's time in 2026. It will be so beautiful. I don't want to cry because I never saw Paula cry. She always laughs. She laughs loud, and I want to be like her. Like I sign my name her way. She would say, see, it's a big P, and then you just fly. So, and I write the same way. Now I sign with a big T, and I fly. And my office is almost as messy as room 158 in the music building on campus here, because we believe a chaotic environment reflects creative minds. And I open my home to my international students for holidays like Thanksgivings. I provide them with a home. And Paula used to, well, like right now here, I see her. I mean, I hear her voice. She never cries to me, and she sings, she laughs, she would put words to any melody from, say, piano sonata of Mozart. And anything that she sings, she puts in words there, and she will tell me, love every note you play. Softly, my songs plead through the night to you. My dearest Auntie Paula, this one is for you.
for Paula's celebration of life from her stepdaughters, Marion and Shea. We met Paula when we were tweens, when she married our father, John, and we were quite nervous because we really didn't know what kind of relationship we were supposed to have with this young, zesty woman who was full of energy and fun. We visited lots of crazy exhibitions and museums. We went to zoos. We went to see shows, and we went to lots and lots of restaurants and ate lots of exciting food. She made us nachos, and we listened to the stories of Chinese grandmothers with bound feet. We had Chinese names, and we learned to make pot stickers and wild rice stuffing for Thanksgiving. So we needn't have worried, because she took to stepmotherhood with the gusto that she applied to everything else. And fast forward 40 years, in a freezing London January this year, we were once again curled up in our favorite pasta restaurant, getting overexcited about the tiramisu. It doesn't feel real that she was whisked off to the other side so early. We can only think that there must have been some kind of spiritual Earthwatch project that needed her help very urgently. A journey that no doubt she is now enjoying with the enthusiasm she had for all her adventures. We will miss her fun, her sweetness, and her wise counsel. We feel very lucky to have had her in our lives, and we will always remember her with love. We're sorry we can't be there in person with you, but we send our love to everyone, especially to Jeremy, whom she adored so deeply, and the rest of the Fan family. From Marion and Sean and Paula's grandchildren, Jack, Tom, Finn, Hattie, William, Sam, and Edmund. During our concert tour of Japan in January of this year, Paula shared a poem with me, a poem that spoke to her, a poem that spoke of her, and a poem that spoke of my relationship with her. The poet is Henry Scott Holland, sometime Regius Professor of Divinity at the University of Oxford. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me. Pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever was. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just round the corner. All is well. Nothing is hurt. Nothing is lost. One brief moment, and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again.
I'll give this a try. I was 24 years old when I met this person who was going to be one of my closest friends and teachers for 20 years. And I can certainly say I'm the musician today that I am because of her. I'm the performer I am today because of her. And I'm certainly the teacher I am today because of her. She lived her truth, and she lived her own life every day, every second of every day. And she even slept with purpose so that she could do more the next day. And I was incredibly inspired by that all the time. She accepted me for who I was, who I am. In fact, she accepted us all for who we were and loved us for that. Not common. So I don't think I don't think that this will heal soon, but I do think that we were all in the presence of greatness. And to my dear, dear friend, I know that the hole you left will not be filled easily. And but her life will always be a beacon for us to live by. So thank you.
Good evening. Paula and I, we are the first cousins. Her father and my father are brothers. My father have 3 siblings, older brothers, and second older brother is Paula's father, and have a sister. My father is the youngest. We are shocked and saddened to hear Paula suddenly left us. The first time I met Paula was at Beijing, China in 1972, when I was 12 years old and Paula was 20 years old. At that time, we did not communicate much because of a language barrier. Later, I came to the University of Arizona to study. We met more often. In my mind, Paula is my role model. Paula gave us the impression that she is always smile, easygoing, helpful, and has positive attitude. She always act like my older sister. She took us to shopping and invited us to have dinner at her home. She was not only an outstanding pianist, but also a good chef. I really like the food she cooked. When my wife and I got married, she organized the wedding for us. Later, I left Tucson to Boston. Then we meet a little bit less. Then later, I moved back to Chicago. I worked at the University of Chicago. So we meet more since then because my other cousin, Paula's sister, Anna, is in Chicago. So we worked very close. Anna actually lived just nearby the University of Chicago. We meet each other in Anna's memorial that Paula hosted in Chicago. When she told me she was retired at 62, I was a little bit surprised. Later, I understand what she's doing. She said she already worked at the University of Arizona for 40 years, so that's enough. So she wants to spend time for herself and enjoy life. Last year, Paula attended my daughter's wedding and played beautiful music with Michael and Melanie. I cannot believe last year was the last time we saw each other. I told her in the wedding, I said we should go back to China together to visit other cousins, but we cannot. We miss her a lot. She will always live in our hearts.
We are about to play the second movement of John Denman's crossover concerto. Played in the last year of his life, premiered at the Tucson Pops Orchestra concert, conducted by Laszlo Verish. And the first person to hear this piece was Laszlo Verish when Paula Fan played the piano with her husband John Denman playing the clarinet. This crossover concerto had three meanings for John Denman. First of all, he crossed over the ocean to play and to teach at the University of Arizona, to be a clarinet professor and my teacher too there. Second of all, it had implications because it was a crossover between classical music and jazz. And probably most importantly, he realized that he was going to play this, probably the last piece he'd ever play in his life. I played clarinet in that concert, and I remember it very well, how he was very sick, but he nailed everything, the high notes, all the fast passages. He was, some people called him the English flasher, meaning he had those gold keys on his clarinet and could play very fast music, score concertos, everything, and nothing was beyond him. He also had a very fast tongue. But anyway, this is a very beautiful, meaningful piece, this second movement. It's very spiritual in nature. I meant to say that he was asleep, and he had a dream that he was playing clarinet in a nightclub, and he was playing this melody, and he woke up and wrote it down. Quite remarkable.
Good evening. I'm Haimi Cho. My sister and I were students of Dr. Paula Fan for over 10 years. I live in San Francisco now, but I grew up right here in Tucson. Dr. Fan played a major role in my formative years while I was growing up. When her name comes to mind, I imagine that those of us who knew her would describe her as phenomenal, unique, extraordinary, as a person, a musician, and as a teacher. But even those words aren't a sufficient testament to who she truly was. In fact, I don't think there's any word on this planet that could accurately describe her. I was your stereotypical Asian American kid. I started piano lessons at age 5, and I hated them from the start. It was the most boring activity ever. And I was jealous of other kids my age who were allowed to play outdoors all day. Little did I know back then that my mindset would take a complete about-face when I met Dr. Fan. I first met Dr. Fan when I was just 11 years old. That is when I had my first lesson with her. Many years later, in fact, just last year at her cousin's wedding where she, Michael, and Melanie played, we were sitting together and we reminisced about my first lesson. She recalled that I was very young and that I desperately needed humor. I didn't realize it then, but it was a very accurate statement. The next 2 years, I had occasional lessons with her before I became a full-time student when I was 13. From that point on, I couldn't imagine my life without music. There's a song called What's the Name of That Song from Sesame Street? And there's a line there that sums up my newfound attitude perfectly. It goes, "Without words and music, a fellow can't go wrong." That was my newfound attitude when Dr. Fan became my teacher. Yes, it's been 33 years, but she is still Dr. Fan, even though she insisted I call her Paula when I entered adulthood. I had a set routine. Wednesdays after school were my scheduled lesson times, and they remain among the happiest memories of my life. She had that rare, uncanny ability to incorporate humor into her teaching and exquisite artistry into her playing. Lessons with her were pure joy. There's no other way to put it. I recall when I was learning to play Rhapsody in Blue, she was demonstrating a particular section to me. And she told me to think of Rolf the dog from the Muppets. It was absolutely hysterical. And I recall to this day, as she was demonstrating that section to me, she was vigorously shaking her head as she played that section. And another memory that remains clear in my mind is when I would be waiting outside to be called for my lesson. She would poke her head out the door and cheerfully call out, "Next victim." My final lesson with her took place just before I left for college. It was emotionally devastating because I knew no other teacher would ever replace her. I had strongly considered staying in Tucson and continuing to study the piano with her, and there were many times when I wondered if I should have followed my heart. Fortunately for me, however, our relationship from student to teacher persisted into a lifelong friendship that persisted until her passing. I could always count on her to be there for me whenever I was home. And I consider myself extremely lucky that I was able to study with a world-class pianist, and she made me into the person that I am today. I also consider myself very fortunate that over the years I was able to interact with John Denman, who had a wonderful sense of humor. I also consider myself lucky that I was able to interact and get to know Michael, Melanie, and Anna, and they are all just as delightful. When things became stressful at school or work, I could always reach into my memory bank and remember all the fun times we had in the studio and outside the studio. Her laughter was contagious, and she had this unique ability to say things in a way that would leave you roaring with laughter. Dr. Fan, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of my family, thank you so much for being an integral part of our lives for the last 33 years. You will always be my piano mother. Thank you for inspiring me, for instilling a lifelong love of music in me, for teaching me the discipline that I carry with me to this day. Thank you for encouraging me to learn the difficult pieces I so wanted to learn. And thank you so much for all the memories you helped create over the last 33 years. I will always cherish the times that we spent together whenever I was back in town, the lunches, the brunches, the Christmas gatherings. It's eerie to realize now that last Thanksgiving would be the last time I would ever see you for the rest of my life. But I am forever grateful that we were able to reunite 3 times last year. I will never forget those times. I feel this voidness that I don't think will ever heal or will go away now that you're gone. But I have no doubt that you will continue to live on forever. Thank you.
How about the nicknames that Paula had? Do you know how many nicknames she had? The last one I can remember, can you imagine? Jaws? Well, she said, let's not talk about music today, let's talk about food. Jaws. There's a piece I was just discussing with Nancy Davis Booth called Mame. And in this piece, there's a boy soprano who sings to Angela Lansbury a piece of music called You're Our Best Girl. Sorry, thank you. You're my best girl. And then Angela Lansbury's character sings it back, you're my best beau, to the boy soprano. I looked at this and I thought, well, it would be something coming from us, so we have to change the title from My Best Girl to Our Best Girl, because that's who she was. She was our best girl. You're our best girl.
I'm Stephen Fan, Paula's nephew. And when I heard Paula had passed, shock didn't begin to describe my experience. I remember my disbelief hearing from my dad. Her death was unexpected, sudden, and happened across the world, and it was so abstract for me. How could this be possible? This doesn't make any sense. She was one of the most lively people I knew. The first thing I remember saying is, I regret I'll never be able to hear her tell stories again. She was the family matriarch and the keeper of the family history. She knew all of these stories about the family and done research on her parents' villages of origin and had their stories as well. I remember retelling my grandfather's stories about having the first glow-in-the-dark watch irradiated from the nuclear physics lab he worked in, and my grandmother's story about being a woman Chinese mathematician cited by a Nobel laureate. All her journeys, all her life experiences, she and all of this was just gone. My wife feels like she was just starting to get to know Paula, and Paula had only gotten to just meet Ezra, my son of a year and 4 months. We had assumed we'd have a couple of decades or more deep in our relationships and to hear her stories. I didn't know what I was going to say today. When you're a family, especially the younger generation of family, so much is implicit and embedded in your experience. I've heard so much today about who she is that I've never heard before. And maybe it's not until you start the next generation and trying to remember and tell those stories that you become a storyteller and that you are able to hold those stories yourselves. But back here in Tucson, as I talk to my brother, my wife, my mom, Christine, my stepmom, Melanie, my dad, Michael, my cousins, Shizuka, Yenna, and Jeremy, the stories and memories start to come out, and we start to remember Paula. I wanted to share a few of those memories and qualities of hers that deeply affected us with you now. She was resourceful. She loved life and would work with it as it came to her. She had this incredible tuning to the present. She was never stuck. She was always moving forward. Paula looked at the big picture and didn't sweat the small stuff. I remember her telling a story about smuggling her father's ashes into China through customs. I remember when on her Earth Watch trips, she foresaw the need that she might need to scale a tree in Africa to escape a rhino, so she took rock climbing lessons. She taught herself enough Chinese to navigate the country and enough Welsh to sing an opera. I remember her saying she ignored the tones of Chinese and that everyone she spoke to in China thought she spoke a different dialect. But that she could always convey what she meant by making up words as they came to her. Cats. My grandma didn't want any cats, but Paula and Anna both wanted them. So when she got older, she and John got cats. And when John passed, she got more cats, and more and more. And with each stray, Paula developed more and more methods for the care of cats. She had a lot of elderly cats and thought deeply about everything for their care and comfort. She provided health care and pet insurance. She had an on-call relationship with her vet and dear friend Drew. She mused about becoming a vet technician as a second career post-retirement from her post at the University of Arizona. I kind of like to think she ran an unincorporated nonprofit. It was that big of an operation. Adventures. She was such a personality, and her life was vivacious. She did all the things many dreamt of, but never maybe even accomplished, like traveling all over the world, getting to know the world's cultures, and sharing her art broadly. David said she told wonderful stories about Earth Watch adventures, long hikes in the wilderness, running from rhinos and escaping them by scaling trees, the difficulties and peculiarities of counting turtle eggs, attending a skunk festival and getting to hold a skunk. I always heard she wanted to have a skunk for a pet. She was game for anything. This is a story from Shizuka. Shizuka had just acquired rollerblades and told Paula, these are really fun. So Paula and Anna went rollerblading, and when Paula got back, she said, don't tell anybody I did that. Pianists aren't supposed to put their fingers at risk. On her travels, if she was ever passing through, she'd always come to visit you and invite you into her adventure. She worked hard and played hard. A story from Nyenha about, Nyenha told me a story about being recommended a piano teacher who was a friend of Paula's, Anne Tenenbaum. And as a child, it was always intimidating to Nyenha to think about Paula and her classmates, knowing how accomplished they were. But John and Paula would always suggest something encouraging and supportive. He learned the importance of practice and hard work and enjoyed living life. And also, he also learned from Paula the enjoyment of living life to the fullest, engaging with it fully. Generosity, care, and kindness. The last time we saw her at Ezra's first birthday party, without any fuss, she took on providing food from the family. She whipped up Mexican food and tamales to Tucson to give all the Pacific Northwesterners a taste of Tucson. She organized family gatherings. She always made arrangements for birthdays and holidays and made sure all the family was invited. She bought Christmas presents for Shizuka's kids every year. She excelled at bringing groups of people together, and she always saw the need, and she was always seeing need and taking care of stuff that needed to be taken care of. She established a travel scholarship in my grandfather's name at the University of Arizona for exceptional physics students. And she created, she donated to a cat shelter in Anna's name and planted a commemorative tree. She cares for creatures close to the ground, but not lowly in any sense, and regarded animals with a great deal of dignity. While we may not have Paula with us today, so much of her lives on through us in our memories and the course, and through her impact on our lives. And today we have an opportunity to bring our living memories together, and I hope we all do so. There's no story or detail too small to share. Let us remember Paula together. I love you, Paula.
Well, I'm going to make an executive decision. At this time, I was actually going to ask people to share their memories, but there's food waiting. And Paula would appreciate this decision, I think. There's food waiting. So we're going to play the last number. This is so traditional, I think, when you have a ceremony like this, you might end with a hymn. But Paula was not really religious. But she did mention the crossing the Rainbow Bridge when she lost a cat and when she lost Anna. She talked about crossing the Rainbow Bridge. And I'm, if anything, much less religious or spiritual than Paul is. I'm an old cynic, once a young cynic, but I love that image of crossing the bridge. And this piece is sort of inspired by that idea about Paula
wondering what is happening, finally crossing over, seeing all of her cats that she loved, and Anna, and my parents, and your beloved John. So here's Over the Rainbow Bridge.
a slideshow showing some of the same pictures, so check that out. And you know, one thing that Paula did, I'm just going to take a little aside, a commercial break as it were. Paula loved telling stories, as we've heard, and she loved telling the stories that I wrote for her, the musical adventures. And I have a bunch of CDs, so please take one as a present for me, and you can hear Paula's voice, and you can hear Paula pretending to be Viennese mice, okay? So I will see you in the bride.